a return to an iconic NYC firehouse, a second chance for a failed reboot, and a journey into the real world courtesy of Jared Leto. Sci-Fi fans, rejoice! Your favorite movies are coming back for round 2, or 3, 4, or 5. Most of us have been desperately awaiting a follow-up to 2015's Mad Max Fury Road since the moment the credits rolled. And while the official sequel to George Miller's action masterpiece, Mad Max: The Wasteland, seems to be languishing in development hell, we've at least got Furiosa to tide us over.
You want to get through this? Do as I say.
Warner Brothers greenlit a spin-off based on Charlize Theron's Fury Road character, Imperator Furiosa. This time, though, Anya Taylor-Joy will be playing the title role, with George Miller in the director's chair and Chris Hemsworth and Tom Burke attached as co-stars. Furiosa filming began in June 2020 and wrapped that October, with a relative lack of news from the set appearing to suggest a much smoother production process than the bizarre nightmare of Fury Road. In September 2022, Warner Brothers announced that Furiosa will hit theaters on May 24, 2024. This marks a slight delay on the movie's original 2023 release, of course, and it will have been a good 9 years since Fury Road, too. Considering the long path to Fury Road and the dead end faced by The Wasteland, however, the impending release of Furiosa is nothing less than miraculous. 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes capped off a critically acclaimed and largely self-contained trilogy of Planet of the Apes prequels. But the story isn't over yet. 20th Century confirmed that work had begun on another installment in the franchise in late 2022. Maze Runner director Wes Ball has been helming the project, which stars Freya Allen, Owen Teague, Peter Macon, and William H. Macy. All we've actually seen of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes thus far is a piece of concept art released by 20th Century Studios. But this project is much further along than you might imagine. Filming wrapped in February 2023, and we even know what it's about. Long after the events of War for the Planet of the Apes split into factions and started building empires. As one group begins to enslave its rivals in the hunt for lost human technology, a lone ape joins a young human woman to embark on a quest for freedom. In a statement, studio president Steve Asbell said that the new Planet of the Apes movie will continue the series' tradition of imaginative, thought-provoking cinema. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is due for release on May 24, 2024. Meaning that, if nothing else, it should give Furiosa a good run for its money. James Cameron has never been shy about hyping up the scope of his Avatar universe. He announced a sequel to the first movie mere weeks after its 2009 release, and then, a week later, revealed that, no, scratch that, he was actually working on several more. Cameron has only once even slightly downplayed the Avatar franchise's growth. That was when he suggested that a poor box office run on Avatar: The Way of Water might force him to wrap things up with Avatar 3. He needn't have worried, though, as The Way of Water earned an almost unbelievable $2.3 billion at the box office, more or less guaranteeing that the franchise will continue until the end of time.
I can't believe I'm tied up again.
The 13-year gap between Avatar and The Way of Water might lead you to believe that we'll be forced to endure a similar wait for Avatar 3. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Somehow, possibly because Cameron is a blockbuster-making machine, Avatar 3 is set to arrive in theaters on December 19, 2025. In November 2022, Sam Worthington told Jimmy Fallon that about 80 to 90% of the third movie had already been filmed, while shooting had even begun on a few scenes of Avatar 4.
And then, there's 5 in the saga if we're lucky enough to get it with.
Life hasn't been easy lately for the Alien franchise. Prometheus and Alien Covenant failed to gather the momentum necessary to justify further sequels, while Neil Blomkamp's Alien 5 seemed to have died the moment Ridley Scott watched Chappie. Hope is not lost, however. In March 2022, it was revealed that Evil Dead and Don't Breathe director Fede Alvarez is set to bring his own Alien story to the screen, with Scott attached as producer. According to 20th Century Studios' Steve Asbell, the movie was greenlit purely off the strength of Fede's pitch. A year later, a press release revealed that the movie will follow a group of young people on a distant world who find themselves in a confrontation with the most terrifying life form in the universe. Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fern, and Eileen Wu will lead the cast. This new Alien movie, which may be titled Alien Romulus, began filming in March 2023. Aside from that vague premise and a tantalizing behind-the-scenes image tweeted out by Alvarez, however, most of the project remains shrouded in mystery. Currently, the film is expected to hit theaters on August 16, 2024. Will it breathe new, horrific life into the franchise? Only time will tell. You're probably well aware that A Quiet Place Day One, a prequel to John Krasinski's superb horror movies A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2, is slated for release in March 2024. You might be forgiven, however, for having missed the news of a third entry in the main series. Paramount announced A Quiet Place Part 3 during an investor call in February 2022, confirming a 2025 release date. So what else do we know about A Quiet Place Part 3? Well, basically nothing. We've had no plot details, no cast details, and no hint as to when filming might begin. Emily Blunt told Collider in 2021 that A Quiet Place Part 2 was intended to be the second chapter in a trilogy. So you can safely assume that Part 3 will once again revolve around Evelyn Abbott and her children. This means that Blunt and her co-stars, Millicent Simmons and Noah Jupe, are sure to return, although it's harder to say whether they'll be joined by the supporting cast of A Quiet Place Part 2, such as Cillian Murphy and Jamon Hunsu. You probably shouldn't expect to hear much more about A Quiet Place Part 3 until after A Quiet Place Day 1 hits theaters. Still, it's good to know that after the release of director Michael Sarnofsky's prequel, our next dose of silent horror won't be too far off. Earning a worldwide gross of just over $400 million against a $170 million budget, 2010's Tron Legacy wasn't exactly a box office dud, but it hardly did the kind of numbers expected of a Disney blockbuster. That iffy reception might be the reason Tron 3 has encountered so much trouble getting off the ground. Notably, Tron Legacy director Joseph Kosinski tried and failed to convince Disney that his sequel, Tron Ascension, was worth making. Either times have changed since then, or the studio has a hell of a film up its sleeve, because the third Tron movie is finally moving forward. Joachim Rønning has been tapped to helm Tron Ares, which is intended to be a direct sequel to Tron Legacy. Jared Leto, Cameron Monaghan, Evan Peters, and Jodie Turner-Smith have all signed on to star. Plot details are scarce, but the film will center on Leto's computer program on a journey from the digital world to the human one. Disney hasn't been forthcoming about the release date either, but Tron Ares should arrive sometime in 2025. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, will probably come as something of a surprise to anyone who saw The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, since that movie was supposed to be the final installment in Katniss Everdeen's adventures. You can work out where this is going, can't you? Yes, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a prequel, one based on the Suzanne Collins novel of the same name. Tom Blythe stars as dictator-to-be Coriolanus Snow, who 64 years prior to the events of the original series, becomes a mentor to a young tribute in the 10th Hunger Games.
As the mentor, Mr. Snow, your role is to turn these children into spectacles.
Franchise stalwart Francis Lawrence directs, with a cast featuring Rachel Zegler, Peter Dinklage, Hunter Schafer, Jason Schwartzman, and Viola Davis. The first Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes trailer offers a few choice glimpses into this early iteration of the games, alongside plenty of imagery that will be familiar to series fans. The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is scheduled for release on November 17, 2023. The last couple of Ghostbusters movies divided both fans and critics. Paul Feig's 2016 reboot failed to break even at the box office and attracted a startling hate campaign from the worst people in the world. Meanwhile, Jason Reitman's 2021 legacy sequel, Ghostbusters Afterlife, fared worse with critics and made less at the box office. Although, according to Forbes, it was just about rescued by its much lower budget. Nobody would have blamed Sony for throwing in the towel after all that. Nevertheless, the studio is set to make yet another attempt at reviving the glory of the first two Ghostbusters movies. Sony announced the sequel to Afterlife in April 2022, and we've since learned a number of details about the production. Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon will reprise their roles alongside their younger co-stars. They'll be joined by supporting cast, including Kumail Nanjiani, Patton Oswalt, James Acaster, and Emily Allen Lind. Gil Keenan, best known for Monster House and 2015's Poltergeist remake, will direct. Although filming began in the UK in March 2023, various reports have suggested that Ghostbusters 5 will take place in New York and revolve around the iconic firehouse from the original movies. And yes, in case you were wondering, the original Ghostbusters will likely turn up. In an April 2023 interview with the Film Collective, Ernie Hudson seemed to confirm that himself, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Annie Potts might appear in some capacity. But we don't know much more than that.
Hey, Flat Top! Have you missed us?
We'll find out soon enough, though, as Ghostbusters 5 lands in theaters on March 29, 2024. In 2014, Jose Padilla and MGM teamed up to bring a RoboCop remake to the big screen. It did not go particularly well. Despite a half-decent run at the box office, earning just over $240 million against a $100 million budget, RoboCop flopped with critics and fans alike. And today it holds a simultaneous 49% tomato meter and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. In the aftermath, star Joel Kinnaman blamed a PG-13 rating and the subsequent dialing back of the violent pizzazz of Paul Verhoeven's original for the remake's poor performance. MGM's next attempt at a reboot, RoboCop Returns, was frustrated by director Neil Blomkamp's departure in 2019. After that, everything was quiet. Then, in 2022, Amazon acquired MGM in an $8.5 billion deal. The next year, it was reported that Amazon Studios had decided to embark on a full-blown reboot spree, highlighting a number of MGM titles due for redevelopment in either film or TV, including RoboCop. Amazon might develop both a RoboCop film and TV series, with the former following the latter. Everything else is up in the air right now, including cast, crew, and release date. But with the studio steaming forward on its attempt to establish a small army of marketable IPs, there can be little doubt that RoboCop will return before long. For better or worse.
Never give up! Never surrender!
That's not just the motto of Tim Allen's character in the unspeakably funny 1999 sci-fi comedy Galaxy Quest. It's also a concise account of Paramount's attitude to producing a sequel. Paramount's first attempt to revive Galaxy Quest came in the early 2010s. The original movie's producer, Mark Johnson, and writer Robert Gordon came on board for this sequel TV series, which was later sold to Amazon. Due to Alan Rickman's tragic and sudden passing in 2016, however, the project was quickly sidelined. Sam Rockwell called Rickman's absence a hard void to fill during an appearance on the Nerdist podcast that year. Nevertheless, in April 2023, it was reported that Paramount TV Studios is actively attempting to find a writer who can resurrect Galaxy Quest for a streaming series for Paramount+. The only name attached to the project so far is Johnson. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure riding on a follow-up to a movie so beloved as Galaxy Quest, but the news that it's finally happening will no doubt come as a pleasant surprise to the fans who never thought they'd see it at all.